So I get the flat and Dan moves in about a week later. We fill the flat with our detritus, the offal, the undiscarded refuse we collected in our flight from our pasts. It's indescribably shabby and mundane. Ashtrays, rope, mismatched pots and pictures, empty bottles, cassettes, corduroys, cheesecloth and crap. I have cardboard boxes full of paper I unpack and throw away all in one movement. I find unironed clothes stuffed inside musty rucksacks, paperback books with no covers, and vice versa. Miles of speaker wire tangled round coat hangers, posters with the corners shredded from too much blue tack on too many walls. The flats were all bare and unfurnished until you moved in, and then Rachel took you to a storeroom on the estate, which was full of second-hand furniture. We picked out a couple of mattresses with minimum stains, a huge sofa covered with cracked leather, the colour of new suede shoes, an armchair, desks. What we didn't have was a toilet seat, dishes that weren't cracked, or anything remotely feminine apart from our hair. The kitchen was our common no man's land, all man's land, where no one ruled over the mess someone else had made. If you wanted a clean plate, you washed a dirty one. You cleared a space to cook among the petri dish of the cooker, you brushed the most recent detritus off the table and replaced it with your own fresh droppings. If no one cooked for a few days, it was like Fleming's Lab after a bank holiday. There was no decoration, the walls an unforgiving institutional white in between the pasta I'd thrown at it. I'd stuck a large map of Europe up on one wall, partly to cover up the lack of anything, and partly as a conversation piece, which both didn't work. It had just looked emptier, and Daniel couldn't deal with the imperial projection, whatever that was. So that was a bit of a toxic wasteland in there. I don't think there was even a chair. We tended to forage what we could and take it back to our rooms to devour in private. The front room was a bit better. I'd created a mural on one wall out of black and white photographs cut out of music magazines, a collage of musicians and bands, but I'd run out of cues and had to fill it up with monochrome shots from perfume ads full of pouty fashion students from some old copies of Vogue I pinched from the college library, which looked fabulously gay. I'd also put 2 huge curtains up over the window that covered most of one wall, mostly because I hadn't got anything else to do with them. After this burst of nest making, I realised Dan had crammed everything he owned, apart from his dirty crockery and some hairballs, into his own room, so I quit. Fuck him, I thought. He didn't notice. The bathroom had about 300 mirrors in it, because I'd smashed the original mirror and glued all the pieces back on the wall higgledy-piggledy. Interesting effect with a few candles, but impossible to shave in. That's why I shaved in the bath. There was some kind of universal hot water system in the block, so you could fill the bath right up and it would never run out. One night when he was out, I put Dan's little telly on the toilet seat and watched the whole of Chinatown in the bath, shave and all. Didn't even clean the bath after I'd shaved in it. Fuck him, I thought. He didn't notice. Dan was an antisocial socialite, a half-formed half-wit. In his defence, compared to me, he was a lot more social, a lot more formed, and a lot more half-witted. If any description of Daniel sounds like a caricature, it's because he is one. I'm not giving to hyperbole, mainly because I think it's a board game, but with Daniel, exaggeration is the relentless norm. We met on the first day of college when I asked him where the bar was. He looked the most likely to know. Typically, he did. And typically, I bought him a drink and he wandered off to talk to more interesting looking people. I've been trying to hold my drink and his attention ever since. I don't know why, though. Once I made a list of positive and negative things about him, 2 columns of reasons why I should be friends with him, reasons why I shouldn't. This can be found in full in my more mature work, Childish Lists of an Egocentric Monomaniac. The negative column needed 2 sides of paper, and under positive I wrote, I like him. I haven't been able to add to the positive side since, although the negative side is in its 3rd edition. When I meet him one afternoon in the holocaust created from the kitchen and some food nobody ate, Daniel is wearing the same as he wears every other day. Black baggy trousers and a long purple dyed grandad shirt, probably a bandana around his neck, a pair of about size 200 espadrilles and a beret. Dan is 6'6", weighs 10 stone sopping wet, has red hair down to his waist, a convincing Van Dyke, and a vague attitude. Google image dippy twat if you don't believe me. We go into Daniel's room and he lay down on the bed on the floor, leaving me the limited choice of the floor or the chair by the desk. I fought my way through the plants hanging from the ceiling over to the desk. Pictures of Daniel's heroes peeped out from between the fronds of the jungle. Oscar Wilde, Charles Manson, Oswald Mosley's barber, people like that. I hated them because he liked them. Laid out geometrically on his desk are little boxes and useless ornaments from countries he'd visited. Countries where I'd never go because he'd been there first. Lucian Freud postcards of blotchy women exposing themselves in portobello bedsits on the wall above the desk. Beads hung on strings, length of supposed to look rich cloth lay draped meaninglessly over things in corners. He had throw-overs where I had thrown-up-overs. There were pens and pencils arranged in one of those desk pen holder things that are supposed to be dusty and hold yoo-hoo and sunglasses, according to me. He could have put an ink blotter with triangles of leather at each corner there without it looking out of place. Could have written teasing musings on it in his turquoise ink, like must exhume Shelley and NB, we don't have to eat just grass. Metaphor? Question mark, question mark. So what then? He lit a cigarette. I grunted and looked around the room at nothing. Daniel smiled a smile as if he knew everything and rolled over to reach for a fake bronze ashtray from Outer Mongolia, I don't know, Camden Market probably. Dunno, nothing. Yeah. It's hard to describe how time passed between us because we didn't know how it passed between us and we didn't know how to make it pass either. I assume it just passed. Outside our window, things were happening, but we like to sit inside and pretend to understand phrases like the death of history. We embrace the widest possible context out of smugness at being given the opportunity to, without actually realising what any other context might be. Like little boys saying they'll have a Ferrari when they grow up, ignoring the fact they'll end up driving a red Ford Escort like everybody else. But somehow the air was trapped in our lives then. Somehow we were allowed to behave as if we were outside all that, above it even though we were just off to one side. The place we lived didn't help. We weren't on the map in a lot of ways. I sit at the desk trying to put it into some sort of disorder, and Dan lies on the bed looking as if he'd thought of something to say a few days ago and he'd been waiting to say it since then, but now he'd forgotten it. In a couple of days he'd probably read it again in Justine or something and forget about it all over again, but retain a nagging memory of having something really good to say. He was like the guy who goes into a huge bookshop and can't remember that really good book he's been trying to find for ages until he gets the bus home without it. Dan lay on the bed, I slouched like a champion, occupying ourselves with the little we had. I roll a cigarette, making the crumbs fall on the desk. He lay doing something in his head, like watching the smoke curl in his orbiting plant collection, or something equally stupid. I wonder if anybody had ever told him plants like to grow upwards. The only plant he ever really wanted to grow was dope, and he never grew it. Even the best two plants he had were mine, which I'd left with him once and never collected. There were enough things growing in my room without plants as well. He could lie like that for ages until I started a conversation, just smoking cigarettes and imagining it was the last century or something. The word salon probably occurred to him a lot. I picked up a book from his desk for something to fiddle with, feeling uncomfortable at sitting straight-backed high up while he sprawled on the bed like it was a chaise longue or something. He wouldn't know what a chaise longue was, but he could sprawl on a bed like it was one. The book is about Byron and his poetry mates and the 3 million women they shagged every week. I flick through the pages and come across one of Daniel's anal bookmarks with some sort of magic fish on it, as well as being into daft gits like Blake and Burroughs. He shot his wife, you know. Daniel did himself the favour of dabbling in the occult. He once informed me of the remarkable benefits of magic wanking, where you masturbated and, just as you were about to come, you wished for something really hard, and guess what? You got it. I asked him if it would work if I wished for this white sticky stuff to come shooting out the end of my dick, but he said I was taking it out of context. Not that this was strange, this magic shit. Brian used to cast spells for exams and stuff, but when we found out he had crib notes stuffed up his sleeves in the final, kind of took the sheen off the whole wizard thing. especially when he came out with a 2-2. And when they spelt his name Brain in the graduation programme, that was really it for me and Sooty's Magic Club. There was even a couple of idiots at college who published a Satanist magazine, Devil's Digest, and went around looking all mysterious in pigtails and black. Except that didn't work, because everyone else had a pigtail and wore black clothes in London in the 80s. Nigel and his wacky girlfriend, who claimed to be related to the Clutterbuck family of witches. More like the Addams family, if you ask me. It was all show business, all I Love Lucifer and Fresh Prince of Darkness. They like to give the impression of knowing dark secrets and having all sorts of funky sex. Love to think that nobody messed with them because they had the beast on their side. This threatening air, they assumed, wouldn't, it occurred to me, be much use when some guy drew a knife on them in Dalston of an evening. "You can't stab me, I'm Rosemary's baby." The guy would make their head swivel round for nothing. Mind you, he'd probably need Gregory Peck and 6 other knives to do the job properly. Whatever, who knows who's right. They just look silly to me. I guess they work in a building society and torture animals at night in Hounslow these days. Have you read this? The Byron. Yeah, bit. Why? Dan just smiled as if taking credit for something. This exchange or the book or something. You could plough your soul into his conversational furrows and you wouldn't get a seedling of satisfaction back. The sponge that never drips. Good listener though, got to give him that. This wasn't deliberate or anything, but he could make you think you couldn't affect him at all. You were there or not there. Big deal. He'd just get up, lying on his bed, watching the smoke curl, etc., etc. What we had in common, I don't know, and I don't suppose he did either. Maybe when you're lost, it's nice to meet someone who's equally lost, coming either way.